It's Wednesday. That means that it is time for the weekly AMA. That means you can ask me anything, and I will do my best to answer it, unless it's something that you know for certain I will know, or if you're asking me, what's your opinion on X? Then obviously I have an opinion on X. If it's something that I don't really know, then I will do my best to find a good answer and hopefully give you the correct answer. I've got a couple of questions this week. The first actually comes from one of my listeners in Cameroon. And yes, I have listeners in Cameroon. Thank you to everybody in Cameroon who is listening, whether it's on the internet, which I know for a fact that a couple of you do listen that way, or via the free-to-air satellite from LRN, which is the Liberty Radio Network, which is one of the networks that carries the show. And so one of the listeners in Cameroon sent me an email asking, do you think that the police should be charged or not for killing black people? And let me give the short answer before I give the long answer. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, and I also think that they should be charged for killing white people and Hispanic people and Asian people. The police, if they are found to be doing something that is not a justified homicide, should be charged for killing anyone. What do I mean by justified homicide? Because obviously they're going to wind up warping their internal investigation to where they claim that anything is justified. Well, the FBI definition of justified homicide when it relates to police officers is the killing of someone who was in the commission of a felony. That's the only thing that the FBI considers to be a justified homicide. Now, obviously, there are so many felonies that I would say that that definition is a little too broad. I would say that it's only justified to prevent the taking of another life. So, obviously, again, they're going to wind up saying, well, the guy feared for his life, so therefore it was justified. And I don't buy that as an excuse, because a lot of these cops have been afraid of little ankle biter dogs, and they wind up killing the dog. Well, I feared for my life. Or they'll wind up tasing some 8-year-old that had like a toy water pistol or something, and then they wind up, well, I was scared. If you're scared of an 8-year-old with a water pistol, then you probably should not be a cop. The entire sort of scope of law enforcement just needs to be totally reevaluated, because you do wind up having these, what Bradley Balco calls the warrior cops, to where it's people who basically want to exert some sense of authority, and a lot of the times they being the police departments, will wind up recruiting people that just got back from serving in Iraq or Afghanistan, and then they make them a police officer. Those people are still in war mode, so they still see everybody else as an insurgent, as the enemy. They're not looking at people as people. They're looking at them as less than people. They're looking at them as enemies, as something that is less than human, because that's what they've been told about the enemies that they're fighting over in Iraq and Afghanistan, is that somehow these people are less than human. And it's not just what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan now. Back, if you look at some of the war propaganda from World War II, you'll see where they were portraying the Germans literally as guerrillas. So it's a way to dehumanize your enemy, to where you then think of them as less than human. then you have no problems killing them because you're not killing another person. You're killing somebody that is less than a person. And a lot of these police officers are still in this frame of mind. They're in the frame of mind of, well, I can do whatever I want and get away with it because precedent has been set that for the most part they can do whatever they want and get away with it. So I think I touched on this Monday when I was talking about some of the other police issues, and Tom Knapp had made the statement that we can't get rid of, the police state sort of mentality without getting rid of the state. And I completely agree. The next question for the AMA. A friend of mine says, I just saw someone post about how libertarians wish there were no laws so that there would be no consequences for doing bad things. How do people get that concept of libertarianism, and how can we combat it? Well, I don't really know necessarily why people come up with the concept of libertarians as people that want no laws so that they can then get away with doing horrible things. Now, I will say that part of it has to do with just overall misconceptions about libertarians, that all libertarians are anarchists and anarchists support chaos. And that's not true at all. Not every libertarian wants to completely get rid of the state. Not every libertarian even wants to go as far as any other libertarian. There are some libertarians that still want governments to run schools. Other libertarians don't want that. Some libertarians think that government should only operate the courts and the police departments. Other libertarians say that they should not operate courts and police departments because those organizations and those entities are completely flawed, and government should not have the authority to operate something, especially something that is so flawed. But that really only touches on the issue. The real issue is, and I'm answering the question in a roundabout way, the real issue is the concept of anarchy equals chaos. And that's due to the confusion of anarchism and nihilism. Anarchy, literally from the Greek, means no rulers. Nihilism is defined as the rejection of all religious and moral principles, and often means a belief that life is meaningless. So what you have is people that think that without rulers, without a government, then you are automatically rejecting morals. And that's really not the case. And I'll get into this a little bit more when we come back and explain why rejecting government is really the acceptance of morals. I'll explain when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I'll get back to my answer to the AMA question about the misconceptions of libertarianism and how to combat those misconceptions in just a second. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They now take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid with Bitcoin. Give them a call, 850-478-5270, for knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. You can also visit online rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So let's go back to the question at hand of how do people get the misconception of libertarians that we are just people that want no laws so that there are no consequences for doing bad things, and how do we combat it? And I posited that a rejection of the state. And what do I mean when I say the state? By the state, I mean the entity that claims a monopoly on the use of coercive force in a geographic region. And I make sure to distinguish coercive force against defensive force, because a lot of times the government will say you have a right to defend yourself, but only they claim the right to use preemptive force against people. Remember, it was George Bush who came up with the Bush doctrine of using preemptive force against Iraq because, well, they might have something that they might maybe use at some point in the future, maybe unless we stop them. And I know that, George Bush didn't come up with the concept of using preemptive force, but he's the one that really made it popular because that was the rationale that he used to claim that Iraq was an imminent threat. Well, they might maybe do something at some point in the future, so therefore we have to bomb them now. And if you have ever seen the movie Ender's Game or read the book, then the concept has been around for a while. In the movie Ender's Game, they go and have the war that ends all wars, where basically they just annihilate an alien planet, even though the alien planet was waiting to have dialogue. They were waiting to negotiate, but because the commander told basically the kids that were operating the weaponry, well, no, we have to attack. Like they're trying to just lure us in. We have to attack. And they also lied to the kids and told them that it was a training simulation, when in fact it was not a training simulation. It was the actual battle. But the point is, the concept has been around for a while of preemptive force. And it's the state that claims the legitimate use of preemptive force. So why do I say that a rejection of the state is an acceptance of morals? Well, here's why. Because without all of the loopholes, and that's basically what laws are. Laws are loopholes that allow some people to get away with doing bad things without getting punished, and they punish other people for doing quote-unquote bad things. And a lot of times, the people that get punished for doing what the state calls a bad thing is something that has harmed no one. But the state harms people all the time. So when you reject the idea of the state, that being a coercive organization that claims a legitimate use, or rather a legitimate right to use coercive violence, then you're accepting moral responsibility, because absent the state, if you do something wrong, you will be held accountable, not by some entity calling themselves the state, but by other people. Now, what I advocate, and a lot of other people advocate, is voluntary association. So, and I realize that that has different meaning to different people. So in my idea of voluntary association, if you want to live with other communists in a communist area, you should have that right. But don't force your communism on other people. If you want to live in some sort of fascist sort of commune, that's your right. Don't force your fascism on people. If you want to live in whatever sort of community you can think of, that's your right. Just don't force that on other people. So in a libertarian society, and for the sake of argument here, we're going to say that libertarian society is one where the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. Nothing else. They can't do anything else. They can't say, well, to protect your life, we have to ban the use of. Nope, because then you're infringing on my liberty. Because liberty means being able to do whatever you want as long as you don't cause unjust harm to someone else. So if I'm sitting here and I'm, drinking 24-ounce Mountain Dews all day long, I'm only harming myself. Now, it could be argued that because I'm drinking that and not purchasing something else, that therefore I'm somehow harming like the wheat manufacturer. But that's really that's stretching it a bit. And that's what the state does. They stretch things and they say if you grow your own wheat, then you're interfering with interstate commerce because you're not purchasing wheat from someone else. So, libertarian society, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't cause unjust harm to someone else. As soon as you cause unjust harm to someone else, you are held responsible for what you have done. So the real way to combat the concept of, well, libertarians are just people that want to do bad things and get away with it, is to turn the argument around onto them and ask, well, what bad things do you think libertarians want to do within the confines of you have the right to do anything you want without causing unjust harm to someone else? What bad thing do I want to do? Or what bad thing do you think that I want to do? And then a lot of times they'll come up with something, and then you can point to any number of cases of, well, that happens today, and it's not the libertarians that are doing it. One thing that comes to mind that I've heard the example, well, in a libertarian society, then people will be raping and killing. Well, one, no, that wouldn't happen in a libertarian society. And two, those things happen today, even with the government. So, really, people are scared of what they might do. And they're throwing the argument at you of, well, you might do blah, blah, blah. So the way I would combat it, throw the argument back at them, ask them for specifics, and then point to those things happening now, and explain how it won't in a libertarian society.
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. ExpressCoin is the best choice for buying Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and more. ExpressCoin prides themselves on their customer service, so much so that the back end on the website should allow them to be even more focused on your needs. Get your cryptocurrencies with money order, check, wire transfer, or cash deposit. Get started at expresscoin.fppradio.com. That's expresscoin.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So that's it for the AMA. Those are the two questions that I had this week. If you want to submit a question to me for next week, you can do that. Send the email to ama@fppradio.com. That's ama@fppradio.com. And last week, there was one of the episodes where I had asked for feedback about the show, what you thought, if you liked the new format, if you hated the new format, if you like the show, don't like the show. And I got one response on Twitter from @2sheds_Jackson. He says, I've just recently awakened to voluntarism, so my feedback is this: I could listen to 10 hours of this stuff. Well, thank you @2sheds_Jackson. Glad you like the show, but no, I'm not going to do a 10-hour show. Obviously, I could, because I've got a lot of thoughts up in my brain, and I could definitely talk for 10 hours. But I'm not going to do a 10-hour show. So thank you again for the feedback. And if you like the show, then give it a thumbs up on the social networks, wherever you might see it. Spreaker, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. And share it with your friends, because that's really what this is about. I don't want to be one of these guys that, quote unquote, preaches to the choir. I would love for the ideas of liberty to reach new people, and knowing that I've at least reached one new convert to the ideas of liberty, that makes me feel good. So, it makes it feel as though what I'm doing is worthwhile. So I've got an article that I'm going to talk about to close the show this week, and it's from Tom Knapp. He writes, and the article is titled, "Two Things About the U.S. Constitution and Amnesty." And I really wanted to discuss this because it's been one of those topics that's been in the news, because Barack Obama gave that speech a couple of weeks ago where he says that he's going to wind up allowing certain people that may have crossed the border illegally to stay here longer if they jump through all of these hoops and hurdles. And a bunch of Republicans are all upset about it, saying, well, they need to follow the Constitution. And other people are saying, it doesn't go far enough. But most of the people are just upset because, he's just making law without going through Congress. Well, Tom Knapp does a really good job of sort of, breaking down some of the things that are involved here. He says, he begins, note, this post was published yesterday morning as a preview/sneak preview for my Patreon supporters. And then he gives a little pitch, become one, and you get early exclusive access. It says, look, I expect authoritarians to have trouble grasping the U.S. Constitution. When you have no intention of obeying a law that limits your authority, there's a built-in incentive to misunderstand it, or at least pretend to misunderstand it. That law, cue Nancy Pelosi on questions about limits to Congress's constitutional authority. Are you serious? But it really bugs me when libertarians, especially libertarians who stress and emphasize strategies like Bill of Rights enforcement, either misunderstand or just flat out ignore parts of the Bill of Rights and the rest of the Constitution. Like this, and he cites the present occupation, or he's citing not a part of the Constitution, but someone who is upset at Barack Obama. The present occupant of the White House has illegally usurped the power to grant executive amnesty to tens of millions of foreigners, either in the United States illegally or about to come. And then Tom writes, let's hit the Bill of Rights portion first and work backwards on the illegally part. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or the people. That's the last sentence of the Bill of Rights, and its meaning is not unclear. If the Constitution does not delegate a power to the federal government doesn't have that power. Period. End of sentence. So in question here is whether or not Congress has the power to regulate immigration. And he asks the question, does the Constitution delegate that power? No. And not only no, but it specifically and unambiguously prohibits the power to the federal government. Article 1, Section 9, the migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit, shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importations not exceeding $10 for each person. The framers considered this clause important enough, probably because the Constitution would not have been ratified without it, that in Article 5, they prohibit even amending it out of the Constitution before 1808, which establishes beyond reasonable doubt that after 1808, the only way to create the power is to amend the Constitution. Feel free to go and find the amendment in question. I'll wait. He then writes, okay, are you back? Didn't find it, did you? That's because it's not there. Congress can charge immigrants $10, but that's the entirety of constitutional federal power vis-a-vis immigration. Nobody even bothered pretending any more power than that existed until the 1870s, when an activist Supreme Court started fantasizing about things, or rather started fantasizing such things into the Constitution. There's no such thing as an illegal alien. But just this once, for the sake of argument, I'm going to pretend that history didn't happen the way it did, that the framers didn't explicitly, and for stated reasons after considerable argument, prohibit the federal government from regulating immigration. I'm going to pretend that so that I can address U.S. President Barack Obama's quote-unquote illegal usurpation in the form of quote-unquote amnesty to people who are in the United States quote-unquote illegally. Here's another section of that pesky Constitution. The President shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Once again, He writes, "There's no such thing as an illegal alien, but if there was, the President of the United States would be entirely within his constitutional authority to pardon or reprieve any or all of them. It really is that simple." And I agree. There should not be these federal ginormous regulations on immigration. Just let everybody show up that wants to be here. Peace, love, Liberty Radio, online in the meantime, fppradio.com.